Hey there, thank you so much for joining me today. I am sorry it's a little late today. I wanted to talk about the score editor in Cubase and how I've begun using it more and more coming from Dorico. Now, it's important for me to say at the outset, I don't think it replaces Dorico substantially, but what it does do is make it possible for me to have the notation first approach in my Cubase projects much more effectively than I felt the old score editor did. What I want to talk about today are two big workflow enhancements that once I got my head wrapped around them really helped a lot with working with the score editor in Cubase, coming from, again, this standpoint of notation first. I'm a composer who really likes to work with sort of seeing the vertical notation. I want to see what my harmony and what my melody notes are doing and how they're interacting with each other. And it's just much easier for me to see that in notation. So if you're like me and you're interested in doing that, or if you're somebody who wants to just understand how to use the score editor and maybe write your notation parts as part of your composition workflow, I think this video will be really helpful. Now, I will say that there are important features lacking here that I have in Dorico, but that's not a big deal because you can actually just export to a Dorico file. So you can actually export from Cubase directly to a legitimate Dorico file, and that makes it possible to just bring it into Dorico where I have, or Dorico Pro, where I have all my superpower tools, things like explode and reduce, and being able to swap voices and condense scores, things like that is extremely, extremely helpful. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about here is layouts, and layouts are an essential part of the workflow, especially when you're working on orchestral scores, because you want to have a way to organize maybe your strings and your winds and your brass or your percussion. Now in Cubase, I tend to compose in Cubase when I'm also doing hybrid productions, where I'm not just using the orchestra, but I'm using maybe phrase-based instruments or textural instruments, things like Arcus or Stray Light, or I'm using synths or Hallion or things like that, where it's not as appropriate to notate a synthesizer with a cutoff or something like that as it is to notate a violin or viola part. So it's really nice if I can have all those elements in Cubase, but I can just look at my strings, right? Because maybe I'm trying to rewrite the harmony or my strings, or I wanted my winds to do this or that, and I don't want to have to look at the whole entire score. I just want to look at the wind part or the string part or the percussion or maybe even just my hybrid instruments. So I'm going to show you how to do that and walk you through the process of setting up these custom layouts. And I'm sure that you'll understand by the end of it why this is such a useful feature and why it's so essential. If you are coming from Dorico, essentially this is the same as the filtering capability in Dorico, where you can actually create staff filters in the upper left-hand corner of the window, and you can decide that you want to look at just your brass parts or your wind parts and so on and so forth, even as you hear the whole orchestration play back. So let's check out how this can work. I'm going to take myself off the screen briefly here. So I've got this very simple score here. Right now it's just showing my violins or my strings. And if I go ahead and play this back, all right, so that's what's playing. And what I'm exploring with the layouts is up here in the upper left-hand corner. So I've created a couple layouts. I think the sync layout is always there. But let's say that I wanted a layout that was just going to show my percussion down here. I've got 4 percussion pieces. What I would do is I'd click on the plus. Brings up this window. I'm going to type in percussion and hit OK. And now for percussion, I'm going to actually, this is just like when you're in the mix console in Cubase and you're deciding what's visible. I'm going to take all these out. I'm going to add in my percussion, like so. And there's my percussion. And now I have these different layouts where I can switch quickly and see, okay, this is my string part, this is my brass part, right? So let's say that I wanted my brass to be the 4 horns. Then I can easily switch between percussion and brass and strings. or I can create any kind of layout arrangement that I want. If I wanted a layout that was just my melodic instruments, or maybe just my bass instruments, things like that, I could have, you know, the bass and the tuba and the bassoons just in one layout. So you can really customize any combination that you want. This is also very helpful to synchronize with the mixer. So I think in the Cubase world, if you're familiar with configurations up here, configurations allow you to only view a certain subset of channels, whether you're in the project window or you're in the mixer, and this is allowing you in the score editor to do the same thing. So it's got some crossover with previous versions of Cubase as well as with current features in Dorico for filtering your view. Now, the next thing that I wanted to talk about, the second thing I wanted to talk about, because these are very closely related, is a compositional techniques using step input. Step input is available here in the main score editor. Let me take myself off the screen again. It's this little stepped icon up here. And what's nice is you can actually select an instrument from the left-hand side here. Now when you've got step input enabled, which you just do by clicking on it, it turns orange like that. And you'll notice now that when I click an instrument, there's this little tooltip that says active track for editing, right? And I can actually write in, you'll see that there's a little caret here that represents, the caret appears and disappears based on whether or not I have step input in there. So let's say that I wanted to add whole notes in my violin 1 part here. This is a little bit of a different workflow than Dorico. In Dorico, I might just select this rest, and then I could go into a note entry mode and start entering notes. It's a little different here how it works, how you actually enable it, but it's very, very flexible. So I enable step input here, and I want to, let's say, enter 8th notes, and I want to enter them on violin 1, so I make sure that that is selected. All right, and then you can see it's actually marked violin 2 here. Let's just go with violin 1. You can see the caret move to the top there. And now I can actually just play on my keyboard, and it's going to input 8th notes one after another. That's what a step input does. It's just going to input consecutive notes with this note value. So I'm going to type in, and this is just on my MIDI keyboard, a C major arpeggio, right? We'll go up to the 7, down like that. And if I had wanted that last note to be a quarter note, I could just undo, change this to quarter note, and as you can see, it'll input the quarter note. Then I can undo step note or step input. That's like undoing note input in Dorico. And now I can actually, oops, I want to make sure that my selection tool is selected. Now when I play back, not hearing it very well in the mix, but there it is. So I can see now my notation that I have added manually. I was able to just play it in very similarly to note input on Dorico. I can of course go back and change these if I wanted to at some point, you know, make this a half note, then it'll change the note value. There is also, I believe, an insert mode. When you are in step input, you can enable move insert mode. And this is really nice because now if I were to play notes in here, let's say that I go there and I wanted to input a half note, with this button here enabled for move insert mode, it's going to actually insert my note. So I'm going to put in a half note, go to half note there. Oops, sorry. Should do this first. Go to half note. The note is selected. Need to go in there. If I were to input the note now, sorry, it's not doing it, and I may be making a mistake here. The note insert, when I did it before, what it did was actually inserts it in there, so I'm going to look into that nail down exactly what the details are before I present it the next time. But the two takeaways I wanted to present here that I think really helps media composers, especially who are composing in Dorico, is to understand that you can come into the score editor and you can actually work with it a lot more like Dorico, where you can input your lines, you can still move things between the staves, you can still add all of your common expressions like staccato, tenuto, that sort of thing. There are a lot of other features which I want to cover in upcoming lessons, things like the phrasing, where it'll actually take your playing, your live input, and it will determine things like what's a legato and what's staccato and things like that. That's really helpful. As well as the export feature, where I could take this score and I could export it directly to Dorico if Dorico Pro has other more advanced features that I want to use. If you have questions about this, please do post in the comments. I will read them and I will get back to you. I really appreciate everybody's support on this channel. And if there are topics you'd like me to cover in the future, also please post those in the comments and I will do my very best to cover them. If you're new to the channel, please like the video and subscribe if you found it useful. I'm doing 3 live streams a week and I am looking for topics to cover, and I really appreciate everyone's support. I hope this helps you out. Hope it helps Dorico users get a bit more usage out of their Cubase installation, gives them a sense of why they might want to use the score editor in Cubase. I'm finding myself using it more and more, which is really delightful. So thank you so much, Daniel, for joining me today, and I will see you guys another time. Bye for now.